Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Follow Up as we look back to Sunday's sermon and dive deeper into topics discussed. I am John Milligan.
I'm Casey Clark.
And I'm Justin Cook.
Episode 2, we're back again for another week. Guys, it's good to be back with you in the studio.
The conference room studio.
The conference room, now people know.
I'm just glad we made it to number 2.
We made it.
Marathoners right here.
Man.
Super marathoners.
Oh,
Yeah, we're excited to be back, going through Mark. But guys, first I have a question for you, a little icebreaker question to get us to know a little bit better. What's the best concert you've ever been to? Justin, we'll start off with you.
Best concert. So confession,
Okay.
I don't like going to concerts.
Wow.
what? Why not?
Wow. Okay. Elaborate.
Probably because I struggle to answer what's the best one I've been to. Like, you don't have great experiences, it's just not awesome.
Uh-oh.
Oh man. Okay.
You
And-
need
and-
somebody to take you.
And my college years was at a college where like you couldn't go to concerts unless it was like Stephen Curtis Chapman, and even that was like a little fringe.
Mhm.
So
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
that,
I mean, but that.
and then you start having kids, and it's like,
Yeah.
ain't got no time for that.
I heard Stephen Curtis Chapman was banging.
He was diving in.
Going deep. Yes. Man.
So I will say the first concert well, there was we had concerts at our church. I don't think those really, I mean, they kind of count. I'm gonna say they don't count. The first one I remember going to on my own.
Yeah.
I went to Casting Crowns
Oh yeah.
at Eagle Church in Zionsville, Whitestown.
Mm.
And so probably the best memories of that. That was like they had just done their Voice of Truth album, and their second album was a live album of all the exact same songs on the first one. It's a
Yeah.
great way to get extra run.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I thought it was awesome.
So good.
And what an album to be able to be a part of, because Voice of Truth, one of the
Tells me a different story.
yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
says,
what
"Do
a
not be
top
afraid."
top five song I think all time in the Christian world at least. Well, but that's a good first concert, or at least
Was-
concert experience.
But Who Am I was better than Voice of Truth initially.
Was every man there?
No. This was before Life Song.
Oh, really?
Made my Life Song sing to you.
Oh,
So that was mine.
it's amazing.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. I've actually not my favorite concert or best concert I've been to, but I've been to a concert there before. Newsboys
Came to Eagle Church?
came to Eagle Church.
Feels like a small venue for them.
I touched Michael Tate's hand. He high-fived me, and kind of high-five and then a graze of the fingers, but it was amazing.
That's starting to get creepy.
Yeah, just a little bit. I'll tell you,
Can we edit that part out?
I don't think so. We'll talk to the producer about that one.
Beep.
Casey, what was your favorite, best concert you've ever been to?
You know what? My best favorite concert that I've ever been to is Ben Rector. He came a couple years
Yes.
ago. It was down at the White River
Yes.
amphitheater. It was awesome. It was such a fun time when the big red, jolly, joyful monster thing came out. Played the piano, quote unquote. It was awesome. Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. I was not a Ben Rector fan before that. That has actually tended to be the trend in the Casey Clark concert scene. Is that I'm not a fan. We get tickets to a concert, and I become a fan throughout the course of the concert. This past spring, got to go see Andrea Bocelli. Had never listened to more than one song by Andrea Bocelli, but now it brings me to tears listening to a slew of his songs. Anyway, so that is
what's the one song you would go to
the song that I would.
from Andrea Bocelli?
Oh man, Nessun Dorma. It is a song that has a build to it, and at the very end, Andrea sings at the top of his lungs as loud as he can, as long as he can, as high as he can. It is just the most beautiful note I've ever heard, and it brings me to tears every single time. It's
You
amazing.
actually cry every time?
Honestly, I don't know of a time that I haven't.
Wow.
Yeah. In the words of Jimmy V, allow yourself to cry at least once a week. Makes you feel more human. And that's a song that if I just want to feel a little bit more human, I'll listen to that. I have no idea the words he's saying, but it's amazing. It's in Italian. No idea.
Really glad you enjoyed Ben Rector.
back to that, John. What about you?
Well, for me, my favorite concert experience, it's really a tie for first. So let me just quickly go through two. First one, 2017. I'm in LA living at Hope Hollywood. My favorite rap artist, Andy Mineo, and his counterpart, Words Played, are coming. No one else wants to go with me. I say, whatever, I'm going by myself. So I went to a rap concert by
You
myself.
said you can't stop me.
I did say that. And he did do that song. And I went absolutely berserk by myself, like hundreds and hundreds of people. And I went crazy by myself. It was so cool. It was on my birthday.
Did you take a video of yourself going crazy by yourself?
I did. I will show you guys later.
No one
It
could
is
stop
so
you,
cool.
though.
No,
Okay.
no. It was okay. They
New
they didn't
promo
care.
video coming out from the follow-up. John going berserk.
Absolutely crazy by myself. Second one, a couple years ago, went to a concert. The band Camino, one of my favorite bands of all time, and my wife got me tickets to go, so her and I went, and it was just an amazing rock concert. Just like the coolest vibe. Nothing crazy happened, but it was just like the coolest experience of all time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And Justin?
I love concerts, Justin. So like I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm okay that you don't experience them, you don't have any good experiences, but I hope you do someday. Maybe we'll go to one.
Maybe we will.
Yeah.
Or maybe we won't.
That's our new staff outing. Going to a concert.
Team building over here. All right, so let's get into it. John, you preached this past weekend.
I
so
did,
I want to
yeah.
ask you, could you give us a 30-second recap of your sermon?
I can.
Is this a new segment?
It is a brand new segment on our second episode ever. 30-second recap.
And here it is.
Glorious.
Here it is, 30 seconds. And really, it's going to be shorter than 30 seconds because I think we can get this down into just smaller. Following Jesus begins it with beholding him, believing in the gospel of God, and letting go of all worldly possessions and desires and to become like him.
I didn't have a timer on, but I would say that's less than 30 seconds.
I really tried this time. I was like, the first time, I can't go over 30 seconds.
Well done. Why don't you say that one more time?
Yeah. Following Jesus begins with beholding him, believing in the gospel of God, and letting go of all worldly possessions and desires to become more like him.
Wow. That was awesome. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was a wonderful sermon. Thank you so much for
Thank
bringing us a sermon on Mark 1, 9 through 20. It was really enjoyable. There was one particular section. So getting into kind of the main part of this podcast, there is a section in this text where Jesus is tempted. He's led out to the wilderness by the Spirit, and he's tempted. John, why was Jesus tempted in the wilderness? And why doesn't Mark give us very many details in his account?
Yeah, that's a good question. I touched on this a little bit in the sermon on Sunday. I think part of it is that while we're seeing Jesus as fully God, we're seeing Jesus as fully man. We're seeing like his humanity in this section of his temptation. But I think there's other parts to it as well where it's alluding back to Old Testament, to like either the Exodus, the original Exodus. Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days. The Israelites were in the wilderness for 40 years. I even think that Mark is even alluding back to like creation time.
I did hear Tim Keller talk about this one time where like we hear wilderness and we think forestry, national parks, beautiful, and really it's the original audience would have heard that radically differently. Like the wilderness is where death is. Think desert, no water, no shade, scorching heat. And so when we hear wilderness, we kind of think like, oh, that'd be great. I'd love to get out to the wilderness and like reset for a bit. And for them, when they hear wilderness, like the Spirit drove them to the wilderness, that is odd. That doesn't make sense. There's angels ministering. And so it would have seemed a much scarier kind of journey of sorts, a scarier 40 days to them than it would have to us. And so when you see him, the Spirit sustaining him, the angels ministering to him, I do think just quickly getting into application, there's a huge element that the original audience would hear: fear, death, scariness, unprotected, vulnerability in ways that we don't when we hear Spirit drove him out, that should really strengthen us in our fight against sin and temptations. That's a bit of an aside towards the applicational side, but I think it's part of what's baked into what Mark is doing with the language there.
Yeah, and it seems as though that the temptation being driven out to the wilderness there, John Chrysostom, early church father, actually looked at that and saw a parallel that though Eve wasn't necessarily in the wilderness, he saw her as kind of experiencing this temptation alone. And so the loneliness aspect of the temptation actually drives the power of that temptation way up. And so in the wilderness, as Jesus is led out by himself, of course, being tempted by Satan with the wild beast, it seems as though he is out, left hung and dry, and he has to wrestle with, has God actually left me by myself? So, John, you...
Hold on. Before you go into that, this right here is a fascinating insight into our pastoral team. I have Tim Keller on speed dial. You have John Chrysostom on speed dial. They're incredible. But your question goes on. It's great. I don't mean to sidetrack us too much. It's hilarious.
They're both in the cloud of witnesses, and that is awesome. So, John, getting back to the temptation, I think that there's a lot of encouragement that we can receive as we look to Jesus as he overcame temptation. What are some of those encouragements that Christians can receive from Jesus having endured temptation?
Yeah, I think we can be encouraged in a lot of different ways. But I think the big one, and I mentioned this on Sunday, we can have hope and confidence in Jesus and in his temptation here in this passage, knowing that, as the Hebrew author says, that he has sympathy for us in our temptation, that he has felt that temptation that we have felt the pain that we have felt, but he did not sin. And because he did not sin, we can now come confidently to him, to the throne of grace, and receive salvation through him.
Yeah, man, that is really encouraging. As I think things that are encouraging for me from Christ's temptation, the fact that he actively obeyed where Eve and Adam did not, Israel did not, but Jesus came as the last Adam, as the true Israelite, in order to fulfill all righteousness by enduring temptation, by being actively obedient where we could not. And now that we're in Christ, we actually receive that obedience to ourselves, which then propels us to actively obey in our lives. We have the ability to say no to temptation.
Casey, you use that phrase active obedience a couple of times.
Yeah.
Maybe people are familiar with that term, maybe they're not. What do you mean as opposed to like passive obedience? I just kind of fall into obedience. Like when Jesus' active obedience is a theological term, not just a common descriptor if he was active and running around the house or something like that. What does the active obedience of Jesus mean?
Yeah, it means that he knew what his mission was, and that was to fulfill all righteousness. That meant to fulfill and actually uphold the covenant of works. And that in the Old Testament, as Adam was put into the garden, his responsibility was to be satisfied in God and God alone, to say, not my will, but yours be done. Adam and Eve said, not your will, but mine be done. We see Jesus and we see Israel all throughout the Old Testament repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again that their father Adam did. And of course, we come to the last Adam and he says, not my will, but yours be done. And so he goes into the wilderness and says that over and over. And by so doing, he is actively obeying in every respect, both legally and morally, what we should have obeyed. And so we often refer to Jesus in his sinlessness. That would be more of the passive obedience, that he didn't sin, that he didn't go off, and so he was sinless. The active obedience is he actively worked and achieved a righteousness through his life. And so it's really important that we don't skip over his life when we talk about Jesus, that we don't skip over and say the death, burial, resurrection, but we say, no, his life was just as important. And that's what the gospel account actually gives us, right? And in 14, 15 of them are all focused on the life of Jesus, what he did, what he said, how he taught, how he ministered, how he healed, all of these things, how he prayed, how he preached. All of these things show us he was fulfilling all righteousness so that he might actually win a righteousness, so that he could actually become sin for those who knew no sin. Or he was the one who knew no sin. He became sin for us so that we might become the righteousness of God. And we receive that righteousness and stand before him clean, blameless.
It's a great 3-minute theological press play right there. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Simple analogy that's helped me on that from a banking standpoint. He's not merely canceling the debt that I owe. That absolutely happens. But there are simultaneously untold riches deposited into my spiritual bank account, so that when God sees, it's not just that I'm no longer having this debt over my head. It's actually infinite wealth of righteousness that Christ has given freely.
Yeah. So that's the temptation of Jesus. Next, John, you talked a lot about following Jesus, how the disciples dropped their nets and followed Jesus, which there's some allusion. Last week we talked about Elijah and kind of John the Baptist embodying Elijah. Well, Elijah actually in 1 Kings 19 walked by Elisha, his disciple, and said to him essentially, like, follow me and come after me. And Elisha says, wait, let me go kiss my mom and my dad, and then I'll come after you. He didn't sense much of an urgency. But we see more of a prophetic urgency here than Elijah had. Jesus calls the disciples, and they immediately drop their nets and go.
Yeah.
What does that look like for us?
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, I guess we could have physical nets. I mean, some of listeners may be actual fishermen. But really, we're talking about the metaphorical nets that we have that we're holding on to. I think for me, those nets that I tend to hold on to are maybe it's not, hey, my family, that hey, I need to go back to see my family first. I want to see them first. I love them so much, and then I'll go follow. But maybe for me, I think it's comfortability. Like, hey, let me get comfortable, or hey, let me get my schedule in order, and then I can better follow Jesus after that. That'll help me follow him better. But we see here with, especially Simon and Andrew, Mark uses for them the word immediately for them, that it is as Jesus calls them, they immediately left their nets and followed him. There was no, well, let me go kiss my family goodbye, say goodbye. Well, hey, let me go grab some clothes real quick so I have some extra ones. Or hey, let me go grab a snack and just lounge around. It's been a hard day of work on the sea. Then I'll come follow you. No, it's immediately going after following them. And I think what I tried to talk about some is, for us, do we understand the worth of the invitation that Jesus has offered to us? Do we understand that Jesus has offered us salvation from our sin and the gift to be able to be sons and daughters of the one true King? And I feel like if we do actually have a right understanding of that, it makes following Jesus almost a no-brainer. We see the worth and we think, yeah, I am willing to just drop everything. And later on, we see that Jesus says that if you were to follow me, to pick up your cross and come follow me. I think that makes it so much more worth it. We see in a youth group right now, our students are going through Philippians, right? We see Paul talking about how to live is Christ and to die is gain. There's this joy that he has for being in prison and seeing the gospel being put forward with the situation he's in. And that doesn't come from just loving Jesus some, and knowing some of the worth, and also loving the things on earth about the same 50-50 or even 60-40. No, we had to be fully invested and know the worth of Jesus's call to us, the invitation. It is far better than anything that we can ever even imagine.
Mhm. There's both a benefit and a cost
Yeah.
to following Jesus. And yeah, you wrap that up nicely. Justin, coming to you for maybe a final question. You know, we see at the baptism of Jesus, Spirit descend, the Father speaks, Jesus getting baptized, and God saying, "This is my beloved Son." So we have here a really unique picture. We don't see the word Trinity show up in the Bible, but this scene seems to describe that. Go into that for us. Unpack that.
Yeah, there's so the doctrine of the Trinity is core to Christian theology, and I think a lot of times as Christians we just kind of throw up our hands like I can't fully understand this whole three in one God, three persons, Father, Son, Spirit thing. But I do think it's critical that we recognize the doctrine of the Trinity is one of the deepest and most necessary parts of Christian theology. Without the doctrine of the Trinity, you aren't a Christian. There's a lot of stuff that Christians want to fight about today of various doctrines or strategies for engaging culture, political activism, or posture towards the world, or whatever. Um, and maybe we get really excited about those things and fail to recognize that this is something worth fighting to understand, even as it's difficult, uh, and understanding its application to our lives. And then, John, I thought you touched on this well in the sermon, in seeing the enveloping picture of love, support, and authority coming down. So, to Casey, to your question, the word Trinity doesn't show up anywhere in the Bible, and so it's a term that Christians created to summarize the clear teaching of the Bible. And this is one of those passages that's so abundantly clear. You have Jesus being baptized, the Spirit coming down like a dove, and the Father speaking all at the same time. So one God, yet three persons here. You see it bookending Jesus' ministry at the beginning here, and then at the very end with the Great Commission. Go therefore, make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Spirit. So one of the very first things we see in Jesus, one of the very last things, Trinitarian doctrine being taught. And it's crucial for Christian doctrine, but also Christian living, to understand the relational and communal nature of God that in eternity past, before anything was created, Father, Son, Spirit living in loving, self-sacrificing, joyful relationship forever together, where they had no need of anything. And out of the abundance, the overflow of their love, God created. Jonathan Edwards would speak of the Trinity like a water fountain that's kind of bubbling up, and the overflow of goodness is what caused the universe to be created, out of God's joy, that the joy he has, he wants to share.
Amen.
And the deepest of joys we have, we always want to share. Like, experience a deep restaurant, or a great restaurant, and deep joy in there. You want to share that with others. Well, how much deeper is this relational joy that God wants to bring us into? If there is no Trinity, you have a singular God with not three persons, just one person. The character of God is not joyfully self-giving, because there would be no one else to give to. And so that it's fundamental to Christian doctrine, but also to Christian living as well. And this is a key passage that starts to open our eyes to this deep truth of Scripture.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, guys, thanks so much for doing the podcast again. We've got week 2 under wraps. John, thanks so much for preaching this week. Thanks for your encouragement to behold Jesus, to follow after him by beholding him, believing in him, and becoming like him. We don't strive to be like Jesus, but he makes us like him as we follow after him. Thanks for that encouragement, and for also the commendation. Hey, we need to sit on the end of our beds, and I did this morning, and say, Jesus, you are great. You are mighty. That's what I did this morning. Hope you all out there also sat on the edge of your beds and said, Jesus, you are blank. And encourage you to do that for the rest of this week. Well, thank you guys, and thank you all for joining us for the follow-up. We will be back next Wednesday.